Welcome to The Explainer. You know, when we think about history, we're usually taught to see it as this grand series of dramatic rises and catastrophic falls. But what if a so-called fall was actually just a really profound transformation? Today, we are investigating a fascinating historical mystery: 18th century India. For the longest time, the narrative was super simple. People thought the Great Mughal Empire collapsed and the entire subcontinent was just plunged into this desolate dark age of chaos and decline until the British showed up. But as we're going to uncover today, reality is far more complex, and honestly, it's far more interesting.
Okay, let's dive into this. The central question we really need to answer today is, was the 18th century actually a dark age, or was it a dynamic transition? I mean, it is incredibly easy to just look at a map, see a massive empire fragmenting into dozens of tiny pieces, and assume that the society itself was completely falling apart, right? But modern historians are actually challenging this long-held assumption. They're finding that, while the political center in Delhi definitely gave way, the limbs of the subcontinent were actually coming alive in entirely new ways. So to really understand this, we need to first set the stage.
The 18th century kicked off with an absolute geopolitical earthquake. In 1707, the powerful Mughal emperor Aurangzeb died, and almost immediately, the centralized Mughal authority began to rapidly decline. To make matters worse, by the mid-century, the subcontinent faced devastating foreign invasions from Nadir Shah and Ahmad Shah Durrani. So yes, it was undeniably a period of intense political instability. Regional states like Bengal, Awadh, Hyderabad, the Marathas, and the Sikh kingdom all began to rise up and assert their own independence. The political map was just completely chaotic. But if we clear away the smoke of all these dynastic battles for a second, what was actually happening to the economy and the everyday society?
Part 1. The Economic Engine. Let's look beyond the political map.
So the economic data tells a really vital story about survival and resilience. Nearly 85% of the Indian population, think about that, 85%, depended entirely on agriculture. The society was fundamentally agrarian and community-oriented, with the local village serving as the basic economic unit. Because these villages were largely self-sufficient, producing their own food and daily needs right there through local farmers, blacksmiths, potters, and weavers, they were actually remarkably insulated. The political fragmentation happening in the grand palaces high above them, it rarely stopped the harvest. This massive agrarian base is what really kept the society resilient.
But here's what's truly fascinating. India wasn't just farming to feed itself. It was actually a major global manufacturing economy. I mean, just consider the sheer scale of their exports. Dhaka muslin, fine silk, calico textiles, indigo, pepper, and opium. Indian textiles were in massive demand all across Europe, Southeast Asia, and Africa. So, during this supposed dark age, India actually enjoyed a highly favorable balance of trade. In fact, European trading companies literally had to pay for these Indian goods in solid gold and silver.
Now, you obviously can't have a massive continental and global trade network without some seriously advanced banking. And this brilliantly illustrates a crucial piece of indigenous banking called the hundi. It was a traditional bill of exchange. Think of it kind of like a modern bank check or a wire transfer. It allowed merchants to facilitate long-distance trade without the incredibly dangerous physical movement of large sums of money across the country. This absolute genius of a financial system kept commerce flowing smoothly, even across the borders of constantly warring regional states.
Of course, systems are built by people, right? And the 18th century saw the rise of these incredibly powerful banking titans. We're talking about major communities like the Jagat Sefs in Bengal, the Marwaris, the Chettiars down south, and the Multanis. These guys financed local kings, funded massive trade expeditions, and essentially acted as the vital financial engines of the entire era. They are living proof that underneath all that political chaos on the surface, complex economic networks were absolutely thriving.
Part 2. The social fabric. Everyday life on the ground.
Now, society on the ground remained strictly structured around the caste system, and actually it became even more rigid during this century. While it did provide a clear social organization and occupational specialization, stretching from the higher castes all the way down to agricultural laborers, it simultaneously enforced severe social discrimination. It completely restricted upward mobility and perpetuated the deeply oppressive practice of untouchability. It was, without a doubt, a society firmly locked in its traditional hierarchies, heavily dictated by birth.
We see this traditional focus reflected heavily in the education system, too. Both Hindu pathshalas and Muslim madrasas were deeply supported by their communities and highly religious in their orientation. Hindu students largely focused on Sanskrit, philosophy, and mathematics, while Muslim students focused on Arabic, Persian, and theology.
But what you really should take away from this is the distinct lack of scientific advancement during this time. Education was primarily seen as a tool for preserving tradition and religious law, rather than pushing the boundaries of new scientific discovery. Within this traditional structure, women generally faced severe subordination. There were major systemic issues like child marriage, a stark lack of formal education, the purdah system, and in certain regions, the practice of sati. Yet, history always gives us incredible exceptions. Extraordinary figures like Ahilyabai Holkar and Tarabai stepped up during this messy political transition. They exercised massive political and administrative influence, literally leading armies and running entire states. They proved that even within highly rigid social structures, remarkable individuals could dramatically shape history.
Let's move to and see how this builds. Part 3. A cultural resurgence, filling the Mughal vacuum.
The 18th century actually saw a dynamic, rapid growth of regional languages. Urdu literature absolutely exploded, championed by legendary poets like Mir Taqi Mir, who crafted some of the most enduring verses in history. At the exact same time, regional languages like Bengali, Marathi, Tamil, Punjabi, and Gujarati all experienced remarkable development. This wasn't cultural stagnation, folks. This was a society practically bursting with creative life, finding fresh, localized voices to express itself as power shifted away from the old imperial center.
And it wasn't just words either, it was visuals too. The famous centralized Mughal style of painting definitely declined, sure. But the artists didn't just put down their brushes and give up. They migrated to regional courts, leading to the rise of breathtaking regional painting schools. Distinctive styles flourished under the Rajput school in places like Jaipur and Udaipur, the incredibly delicate Pahari school in Kangra, and the rich Deccan school in Hyderabad. They directly replaced the declining Mughal art style, continuing the subcontinent's vibrant visual traditions in bold, new, localized ways. Similarly, classical music and dance forms, like Kathak, found deeply enthusiastic patrons in these newly wealthy regional capitals.
Part 4. Decline or transition. The final verdict.
So, the crucial point is, for a long time, the older view, championed by historians like Jadunath Sarkar, labeled this the age of decline. And you know what? If you only look at the fall of the emperors, the foreign invasions, and the administrative instability in Delhi, that perspective makes perfect sense. But the modern view, supported by historians like Satish Chandra and Muzaffar Alam, looks at the whole picture. They argue that political decentralization did not mean complete societal decline. Because of the flourishing regional states, those strong global textile exports, the advanced indigenous banking, and the vibrant cultural creativity we just talked about, this era was actually one of profound continuity and dynamic transition.
And that leaves us with a really profound, lingering question to wrap up this explainer. Does political collapse always mean a society's decline? As we've seen with 18th century India, a crumbling empire can actually create the necessary space for remarkable regional resilience, economic adaptation, and cultural brilliance. It fundamentally challenges us to rethink how we label historical periods. Just because the kings are falling doesn't mean the people aren't rising. Thanks for exploring this with me today, and keep questioning the narrative.